1981, there were 270 reported cases of HIV, mostly gay men, and 121 of those died.
In 1989, there were 100,000 cases reported in the United States.
Today, 1.1 million people are living with the HIV infection. Since the AIDS disease was discovered, 636,000 people have died.
On November 7, 1991, popular NBA Hall of Famer LA Lakers player Erwin Magic Johnson announced he was HIV positive and forever changed the way the public saw HIV and AIDS.
HIV stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. HIV attacks humans' T cells and copies itself. Once HIV attacks enough cells, people develop the AIDS disease. Today, we know it is possible to prevent AIDS from developing through treatment called ART, or antiretroviral therapy. Today, in the United States, about 1 million people are living with HIV, and 1 in 6 people are unaware of their infection. Since the first reported case of the HIV infection in 1981, the number of reported cases has grown since the 80s, while the number of deaths grew during the 80s, then declined during the 90s. The first reported cases during 1981 were of gay men, which led to the new sickness being called GRID, gay-related immune deficiency, gay cancer, and gay compromise syndrome. During 1982, 20 states had reported cases that were not only affecting gay men, but also heterosexuals, namely drug users. The fear of contracting the disease started to become more widespread. AIDS got its name at a conference in July of 1982, and during that time there was an average of 1 to 2 new cases reported every day. There were high levels of prejudice and stigma surrounding AIDS because it was associated with drug users and gay men. Because of this, media coverage was limited, and many doctors were reluctant to attempt to treat people because there was such little knowledge about it. During this period, the U.S. government ignored the growing epidemic. In a press briefing at the White House during 1982, a journalist asked a spokesperson for President Reagan, "Does the president have any reaction to the announcement from the Center of Disease Control in Atlanta that AIDS is now an epidemic and has over 600 cases?" The spokesperson responded, "What's AIDS?" To a question about whether the president or anybody in the White House knew about the epidemic, the spokesperson replied, "I don't think so." Because of the non-responsive Reagan administration, there were a lot of activist groups that started trying to support those infected. The Kaposi Sarcoma Research and Education Foundation in San Francisco and Gay Men's Health Crisis in New York both wanted to spread awareness of the growing epidemic. In 1984, Margaret Heckler announced that they would soon have a commercial test to identify the virus, and within 2 years there would be a vaccine for it. In 1985, the U.S. government gave 5 pharmaceutical companies licenses to develop a test for HIV, and during this year, the first blood test for identifying HIV antibodies was made commercially available. Reagan also acknowledged the disease for the first time, saying, "I have been supporting it for more than 4 years now. It's been one of the top priorities with us, and over the last 4 years, and including what we have in the budget for '86, it will amount to over $500 million of what we are provided for research on AIDS, in addition to what I'm sure other medical groups are doing." Instead of advocating safe sex, Reagan blocked HIV-positive people from entering the United States and promoted abstinence as ways to slow the spread of the virus. The first education AIDS campaign was finally launched in 1988. A brochure entitled "Understanding AIDS" was sent to every household. At this point, about 45,000 people had died from AIDS. In 1987, the AZT drug was approved as the first drug to help slow AIDS. People were frustrated that it had taken the FDA so long to approve a drug to combat AIDS and led demonstrations. 1989 results from a major drug trial known as ACTG-019 were announced. The trial showed that AZT could slow progression to AIDS in HIV-positive individuals with no symptoms. These findings were thought to be extremely positive.
It was a disease that homosexuals had, and some people thought that, oh, it's God's will that they're sick with AIDS.
This appeared to be an anomaly, an untreatable disease that no one in the medical community knew how to deal with, how to treat.
Mr. Woodruff.
Can you give me ACT? At the next industry state, they just released it for testing. Oh, and I want to buy some. Now.
That isn't how it works. For about a year, a group of patients gets either the drug or a placebo. It's totally left up to chance. Not even doctors are allowed to know.
So you can die in people's sugar pills?
It's the only way to know if a drug works.
Can you get something for me? I got cash. I can go a month, a week, how are you gonna do it?
I hear you. Unfortunately, no. But when the drug is proven to work, and if you fit the profile, then yes.
She's telling me I'm as good as a horse being sold for dog food, huh? Okay. Here. How about this stuff overseas, huh? Germany, they got this dextran sulfate. All right, and they got this DDC in France, supposed to keep the healthy cells you got from getting the HIV. And they got AL721 over in Israel. How can I get some of this?
None of those drugs have been approved by the FDA.
Screw the FDA. I'm going to be DOA. What, I gotta sue the hospital to get my medicine?
Mr. Woodruff, I assure you that that would be a waste of your precious time. There is a support group that meets daily in Dradi Auditorium. I suggest you try it out. Maybe go talk about your feelings, your concerns.
I'm dying.
Ryan is gone, and just as anyone who has lost a loved one to AIDS, I miss him deeply and constantly. He is gone, but I want his life to have meaning beyond his passing. It is my hope, President-elect Clinton, that you and your administration commit the resources needed to eliminate this awful disease that took my friend and ended so many promising lives before their time. This song is for you, Ryan.
Soon, an unexpected boy would prove to be one of the biggest faces in the HIV/AIDS chronicle. Shortly after his birth on December 6, 1971, Tacoma, Indiana boy Ryan Wayne White was diagnosed with hemophilia, a disorder in which the blood does not clot the way that it is supposed to. Growing up, Ryan suffered from hemorrhages, sometimes receiving IV treatments as much as twice a week. At the young age of 13, on December 17, 1984, Ryan was battling pneumonia and required surgery to remove 2 inches off his left lung. Shortly after the operation, the doctor told Ryan's mother that he had contracted the AIDS virus through a blood transfusion. Ryan was given only 6 months to live, although he ended up making it another 5 years. Although he pushed on and attempted to live a normal life, White faced heavy discrimination due to the fact that people were educated very little about AIDS in 1985. The school that he attended would not allow him to go to class anymore. Restaurants threw away the plates that he had eaten on, and a bullet was even fired into his home, which eventually forced his family to move to a different city. In the following years, before Magic Johnson had even come out as HIV positive, Ryan became a teacher to people who didn't understand the disease and opened the minds of millions of people, which attracted the attention of the media. Many notable shows and magazines featured him, and the story of his life was published as a book called My Own Story. A movie on ABC called The Ryan White Story was even created. The media coverage quickly attracted the attention of many celebrities, including Elton John, Michael Jackson, Donald Trump, Olympic diver Greg Louganis, and President George H.W. Bush. After the long tale of trials and triumphs that was his life, Ryan White tragically passed away on April 8, 1990, merely months before the Ryan White Comprehensive AIDS Resources Emergency Act, CARE, was passed. The name of this act has been changed to the Ryan White HIV/AIDS program since, and it works with cities, states, and local organizations to provide HIV and AIDS-related services to over 500,000 people each year. It is provided for those who do not have sufficient health care coverage or financial resources to cope with the disease. In 1991, Michael Jackson recorded and released a song dedicated to White titled Gone Too Soon for his 8th studio album, Dangerous. This tribute to Ryan's life has carried on through the years, and the HIV and AIDS epidemic is often remembered alongside White's name. August 14, 1959, Magic Johnson was born in Lansing, Michigan. He was fascinated by basketball from a young age and was an avid player. Johnson earned his nickname Magic as a 15-year-old sophomore at Everett High School. He was most successful in his senior year when he led his team to winning the state championship. Though he was being recruited to higher-ranked NCAA schools such as UCLA, Johnson decided to enroll at Michigan State in 1977 so that he could stay close to home. As a Spartan, he was named MVP multiple times. He was heavily idolized by basketball fanatics. In 1979, Johnson decided to forego the remainder of college to join the NBA. He was the first overall pick of the draft. After a visit to the doctor before the 1991-1992 season, Johnson discovered that he had tested positive for HIV. Dr. Michael Melman, the Lakers team physician, was the first to see the results of the physical showing that he was HIV positive. Johnson requested 3 tests to believe that he had in fact contracted the disease. In a press conference held on November 7, 1991, he announced that he would immediately retire from the NBA.
First of all, let me say good late afternoon. Because of the HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers today. I just want to make clear, first of all, that I do not have the AIDS disease, because I know a lot of you want to know that, but the HIV virus. My wife is fine. She's negative, so no problem with her. I plan on going on living for a long time.
Initially, he said that he was not sure how he had contracted the disease, but later admitted that it was through having multiple sexual partners during his playing career. At the time he came out, only a small amount of people with HIV had contracted the virus from heterosexual sex. It was rumored that Johnson was gay or bisexual, though he denied both. In 1991, many people didn't understand the difference between HIV and AIDS, and they thought that either one was a death sentence. People thought that Johnson would die within a year or two. Multiple doctors and carefully selected medicine kept his viral load so low that it wasn't even detectable in his blood. At first, Magic did not return to play with the Lakers because his teammates feared that contact with his skin or sweat might make them sick, even though doctors had shown that it was impossible to get HIV through such contact. Johnson lost support and admiration after his announcement because people were angry with his condition. Johnson was a member of the 1992 United States men's Olympic basketball team, which earned the name the Dream Team. They won Olympic gold. He returned to the NBA to coach the Lakers towards the end of the 1993-1994 season, replacing Randy Funn. At the age of 36, Johnson attempted another comeback as a player. On May 14, 1996, after the Lakers lost to the Houston Rockets in the first round of the playoffs, Johnson retired permanently, saying, "I am going out on my own terms, something that I could not say when I aborted a comeback in 1992.
I think shock and disbelief, because nobody expected, him to had everything going from him. He's got AIDS? Are you kidding me? But it's the homosexual disease. And obviously he wasn't homosexual, because he had a lot of ladies that he spent quality time with.
Even with Magic Johnson's positive attitude, his teammates, the media, and most of the public did not take his announcement lightly at first. After the ordeal, 61% of Americans believed that it had changed their attitude about HIV and AIDS, yet less than 5% still agreed that just anyone could contract the virus. However, the minority that did was quickly going to increase. One 27-year-old male who had had 3 sex partners in the previous months indicated that Johnson's announcement showed how AIDS is, quote, hitting home a lot faster than people think. On the courts upon returning to the LA Lakers during the 1995-6 season, however, Johnson received much less discrimination than he previously had, both on and off the courts. During this comeback season, he played in 32 games and scored many points for the Lakers. This comeback showed the country that having the HIV virus does not equate certain death and incapacitation from living life.
As more prominent people stepped forward and said they had this untreatable disease, I think it became known that this was a huge problem in the general population, that we needed to fund research and we needed to find a cure.
What happened to your face?
I have AIDS.
Oh.
Because we respect you so much, we must be honest with you.
Excuse me.
Am I being fired?
Would you accept a client if you were constantly thinking, I don't want this person to touch me when they even breathe?
Things can kill people, man. Bullets kill people. Car accidents kill people. Look at where we live, man. Here it is. The disease called AIDS, so we got to keep in check. The way we behave, it hits men and women and the young ladies, rich and poor, gay or straight, and the babies. There's too much ignorance, folks don't know the deal. Never once thinking how the victims must feel, because when you're well, they'll say they love you so much, but as soon as you're sick, they're afraid to touch. The cops wear gloves like their bodies are fume. Now come on, officer, the person's just human. There's a drug. It's called AZT, and the folks with AIDS need it immediately. It's the ignorant ones who really seem to be ill, because what they don't know is the ignorance kill.
I think at first the government tried to cover up how big this epidemic was and how it was going to affect our population. That was something that I think our government should have heeded early, that this is huge. We need to get on this. We need to find out what this is and start curing these people or finding ways.
For many people, November 7, 1991 will be remembered as a momentous history marker. After Johnson's press release, classrooms across the nation dedicated the day to educating students about HIV/AIDS. NBA fans and non-fans started to tackle the issues that today seem obvious, but in that period of time were uncovered territory. It made people notice for the first time that you can get infected with HIV without being gay, without being a drug user, without being a sex worker, said Kevin Frost, CEO of AMFAR, the Foundation for AIDS Research. A lot of people took notice, and that changed the perception of how people got infected and who was at risk. Johnson has done a lot of things to give back to his community and find answers about HIV/AIDS, but overall the biggest impact he has had was how he changed the public opinion. When he announced it was a reality check, because at the time it could have been anybody. James Worthy, one of Magic's teammates, said. A lot of people started to wonder about themselves, especially people who had never been tested before. He taught us all a valuable lesson. Back in the early 90s, you thought it was a death sentence. You thought it was over. To see him put meaning on a disease that only had one meaning, that was great. In March of 1993, the House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly to continue banning people from the United States who were HIV positive. The Clinton administration was against this ban but made no move to change it. Clinton did establish the White House Office of AIDS Policy during the same year, which showed the government was starting to become more proactive. During 1993, the first Hollywood movie about HIV/AIDS was also produced, starring Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. In 1994, a condom campaign was launched. There was a lot of debate about the campaign because the promotions on TV and the radio were so frank about sex, which was very new for many people to be seeing and hearing. Around the same time, the FDA approved the first oral test for HIV. The government had approved an AZT trial during the late 80s, but its effectiveness was questioned, which led to a second drug trial being approved. In 1991, DDL was approved for treating patients who were intolerant or whose health had deteriorated while on AZT. Around the same time, they also approved DDC for investigational use in patients with AIDS. The DDC trial was stopped because the results were not as good as those with AZT. Later that year, DDC was combined with AZT, which was the first successful use of combination drug therapy for the treatment of AIDS. This led to the development of highly active antiretroviral therapy, HAART. Although it is disappointing that it took the United States so long to recognize and act, Johnson's announcement changed the perception of what it means to live with HIV. By not only surviving the past 20 years, but also by becoming a successful businessman, he is still the most visible, high-profile symbol of something that was unimaginable in 1991. Over the years, Johnson's dedication has showed that HIV doesn't have to slow anybody down.